Hey, everybody, it's Dugan Kelly from Kelly Clark. So happy you're here with us today. Excited to share with you our keys to success on capital calls. So many sponsors, operators, syndicators from around the country often ask whether their deal is subject to a capital call. And so we're going to talk about it today, about what makes a good capital call, what we consider, in our opinion, is going to be the keys to success of how to conduct a capital call and what that looks like. So without further ado, a little bit about us and our firm. Our attorneys have been practicing collectively for over 50 years. We've got offices in multiple states. For many sponsors, operators, syndicators, we operate throughout the entire country and taking you from acceptance of your LOI all the way to the closing table and your securities in between. We've structured deals in excess of $10 billion, licensed in multiple states, and then I've written a couple best-selling books, collaborative author on purpose, passion, and profit, and success habits of super achievers. Many of us that think about capital calls, we think of it like this, right? Our daughter or our kids saying, "Hey, Dad, I'm going to go hang out with some friends," and the dad saying, "Are you asking or are you telling me?" And then she's saying, "I'm asking for money." When in reality, it shouldn't be that subtle. We don't have to have capital call that are surprising to passive investors, operators, syndicators, sponsors. So what is a capital call? It's often called a cash call. And this is the process by which a fund manager or the general partner, if you're in a limited partnership structure, or a manager or managing member in a limited liability company, a syndication, the people that are in control, the people that are saying, "Hey, we need additional funds. So we're asking our investors or our passive investors or our limited partners to essentially participate in that." And this is where they ask the fund investors to contribute their pro rata portion of the fund commitments. All right. Key number one, be excited. You're going to have a capital call. In other words, do not freak out. Many people think it's the end of the world if you have a capital call. And in my opinion, that's not so. That's not true. Having a capital call provision in your operating agreement, if you're a passive investor, is a good thing from the standpoint of, if you don't have a capital call in there, what's the sponsor, operator, syndicator, the control party, the general partner to do? Allow to hand the keys back to the bank without taking the next step to ask for the much needed capital, potentially for either operations, to pay the monthly nut, or to do some sort of capital expenditure at the property, or maybe you're waiting for an insurance payment from part of the property is subject to a casualty event, and you need a capital call in order to fill that gap between when you get the insurance check and not. So there's lots of legitimate reasons to have capital call provisions inside your operating agreement. And the first key to success of any capital call, in my opinion, is not to freak out. All right. Key number two, be clear and consistent about the reasons for a capital call. So if you're a sponsor, operator, general partner, syndicator, somebody that is in control of a fund or a syndication that is about to do a capital call, you need to be clear and concise and about the reasons for it. So think about a town hall or an interactive way to engage your investors. Be prepared to give the reasons of why you're asking for a capital call. Be professional in your messaging. Have the exact amount that you're going to seek in the capital call. Be positive in your messaging from the standpoint of the reasons why, and then be flexible in amounts coming from investors. And if you have multiple general partners on the deal, everybody needs to be on the same page. So it's not good if you have multiple general partners and one person is saying something and another general partner is saying something different to your investors. So you need to be on the same page as to what that looks like. I'm a big fan of a ballot. So ballot, not necessarily, maybe your investors don't have a vote in whether there's going to be a capital call. So you're not necessarily, when I say ballot, you're not necessarily seeding or asking for people saying that you're not going to have a capital call if there isn't a vote required in your operating agreement, but you need an expression of interest from your passive investors. So sometimes people will gather that on the town hall, but what happens if some of your investors aren't able to attend the town hall, or they're not able to express their interest, right? In what that looks like. And maybe your operating agreement theoretically calls for an affirmative vote. So under all of those circumstances, I want you to consider the possibility of using a ballot. A ballot asks for a restatement. It basically gives you an opportunity to restate the reasons for the capital call. It asks for participation, and it gives them the choice to either participate or not participate. It reinforces the obligations of all fund investors to essentially express their intent in connection with it, and reminds the investors of, if they choose not to participate, what will happen. Some transactions have a penalty associated with it. Some transactions result in automatic dilution of those passive investors' interests. Others do not. So it's very important for you as the sponsor, operator, syndicator, the general partner, somebody that's thinking about the possibility of a capital call, to understand the reasons for it and be able to express those and be able to gather interest from your potential investors included in that. That's key number 3. That's the third key to success. All right, and this is what one might look. So right here, you've got essentially some places where you're going to be able to allow investors to check yes if they're going to participate, and no if they're not going to be participating. So obviously, if they're going to say, no, I'm not going to be participating in the capital contribution, they understand that the manager, which would be the general partner in this hypothetical, might dilute their interests associated to make it so that it's fair for the other passive investors that do in fact participate. And then you might, if you're a manager or general partner, if you're thinking about trying to take in funds from outside individuals that are not presently a member of the limited liability company or the fund, or a limited partner in the fund, that you might want to try to gather that vote from the investors if you're required to ask for that vote in the same aspect. So you're asking your investors to give you a yes or a no on the capital call, or to allow you to go outside to potentially get that much needed capital, in your opinion, from outside individuals. That's key number 3. All right, key number 4. It's very important for you to send out this ballot or this expression of interest, the solicitation of asking investors to really participate in this. It's important for you to send it out to all fund investors. The investors need to know what their share potentially of the amount is due, the due date, right? And then the banking details, because don't just assume that if you've been using a portal, if you raised equity for your deal, that the investors have access to the same bank account that you want the capital call to be put in. So you want to be able to reinforce that, make that as easy as possible for your investors. That's key 4 of our 7 keys to success on what a capital call looks like. All right, key number 5, you need to follow up. Following up with investors is very important associated with this process, because a lot of times you think that investors are tied to their email, or they're looking at their phones all day long, and that the only thing that's on their plate is this particular deal or their investment in your deal. And not so. You're the asset manager, you're the general partner, you're the captain of the ship potentially on this deal. You need to be understanding that most of your investors are passive. They have W-2 jobs or 1099s. They're out doing other things and not actively on a day-to-day basis or minute by minute monitoring their investment. So I'm a big believer in either meeting with those investors, having face-to-face with those investors. It can be electronically through the use of a lot of technology that's in the space now, or calling investors. But that's key number 5. And be prepared to allow investors to ask questions. You need to be prepared to authentically, transparently answer questions that your investors might have about the reasons associated with the capital call. And you need to be prepared to take some criticism, and that's okay. Allow your investors to say their piece. Be firm in your desire and your understanding of the reasons for the capital call, but you need to be able to allow them the opportunity to ask whatever questions that they might have. All right. Asking for money is better over coffee than over a computer. I couldn't have said it better myself, right? That's, again, reinforces this idea that this is a personal relationship business. People invest with people they like, know, and trust. And if you're somebody that has raised capital for one of your deals, you understand the personal nature of that investment, the stewardship principle at its core, the fact that you are in a place of trying to account for somebody else's money, hard-earned money that they have earned. So understand that this is a personal relationship, and you need to be able to get in front of them as quickly as possible. All right, key number 6, we call this be flexible, right? So you need to be prepared to re-explain, not just in email, not just in text messages, but it might be in person. It might be over email. It might be on the phone. You have to be prepared again and again to be able to re-explain the reasons for the capital call. Be firm, yet willing to hear the venting of fund investors. Whenever you're asking for investors to put in additional capital due to either change in market conditions, maybe something happened at the property that was unexpected, all of that is understandable. That's all usually a part of the risks associated with any investment. But you have to be aware, show a high level of emotional intelligence to understand that your investors are understandably wanting to know what happened. Why are we in this situation? What is the money going to be used for? When do you need the money? Where am I sending the money? And how did you calculate what my share is of the money? And what's going to happen if I choose not to participate? All of those are normal questions that you should have at your fingertips. And then obviously be aware and willing to allow people flexibility. So some people, depending on their budget, might not be able to fund their full allocation of their capital call. And you need to be able to adjust the equity roster if you're diluting, which most people do dilute. Even if there's no penalty associated with that, you need to be prepared about that. And then key number 7, and this is kind of like a plan B there, or you might lead with a member loan and then pivot to a capital call. It doesn't really matter in what which scenario or what priority you place. Other sponsors, operators, syndicators favor member loans, whereas others favor potential capital calls. But if you're the person that's in charge of this, and for whatever reason you fall short on your capital call, you need to be thinking about possibly something else, and that would be a member loan, which is different. Member loan is basically asking existing members or potentially outside new individuals that might be coming in as a member to be able to participate in a member loan, which carries potentially an interest rate associated with that. And instead of the members being diluted, that member loan now sits in front of what we call the common equity in your capital stack. It sits behind the debt and it sits in front of the common equity. And then it could potentially have a variable interest rate, a different interest rate. Even if you're offering a preferred return to your common equity, theoretically a member loan could carry a different interest rate for that. So that is key number 7. You need to be willing to think outside of the box and what a member loan looks like. And again, this member loan, you got to remember that if you have debt on your property, that your property is most likely subject to what we call loan covenants. That means that your member loans you can't give a security interest. You can't give collateral in the same collateral that the lender has, because that would be a violation of your loan covenants. So you want to make sure that you understand what the bumpers are, what restrictions and prohibitions you have in place if you're thinking about doing a member loan. And then the member loan typically is paid back as cash flow allows or at a capital event. A capital event involving commercial real property might be a refinance. It might be a supplemental loan. And it might actually be a sale or the secondary or a follow-on offering where you're issuing additional securities. Any of those potentially could be a capital event at your particular property, and that might be a trigger for the repayment of those member loans. But the point is to remember that the member loan process is different than the capital call process, both of which will be allowed or set forth in your operating agreement. If your operating agreement does not have either a capital call section or a member loan section, you might want to discuss with the sponsors, operators, general partners about amending your operating agreement, a lot of which will be dictated to you by the state in which your entity is formed, and your operating agreement is governed by the Limited Liability Company Act of the particular state about how or when or if you can amend your operating agreements. But all of those things are something to be taken into account of when you're considering this. A promissory note is often one of the devices that is circulated associated with a member loan if you choose to do that. And there will be certain payment terms about how much money is being loaned or advanced by the member, and at what interest rate and what the maturity date theoretically is. And then what are the obligations of the company in the repayment of that. All of that should be set forth in that promissory note. So promissory notes often have some key terms. You're going to see things like payment terms, waivers, counsel fees, transfer, default, and acceleration, notice, right? Where are we sending the checks? Miscellaneous, waiver of trial by jury is often common associated with these types of transactions. What happens in the event of a default? The remedies associated with such default. Is there a prepayment penalty? What is the authority associated with who is willing to essentially grant the ability for the member loan? Obviously, signatures. When we're dealing with commercial real estate and real property, we don't have things in just like talking back and forth oral contracts. We want to always make sure that our writings reflect essentially the meeting of the minds between the parties, and then what the applicable law is that applies to your promissory note or your member loan. So I want to leave you with this last quote. I love this quote from Robert Kiyosaki. He says, "It's not how much money you make, but how much money you keep, how hard it works for you, and how many generations you keep it for." So if you are a sponsor, operator, syndicator, a general partner, or even a passive investor, we understand that the money that you invest into these deals and the time that you spend is very valuable. It's an awesome responsibility on all of those roles to participate in any syndication involving this. We hope that this content has been helpful for you. If you found that this content is great and you would like to know more about us or other content that we create in this area, this wonderful area that we love so much, please feel free to reach out and touch base with us. There's our contact telephone numbers. You can always drop us an email. You please click on our YouTube channel, hit like and subscribe, and we'll be able to start sending you additional free content. So we hope this has been helpful for you in wherever you're at, and God bless you. Happy hunting.